incredible opportunity. Technologically, it's an incredible opportunity. One of the fundamental problems I run across in talking to people about virtualization, however, is it's mostly being done by people who have no real understanding or grasp of security. So they're literally virtualizing security, and they don't understand what security is. So there are big issues there, and I could go into that some other time, but that's not this talk. Personal cybersecurity we'll touch briefly. But I want to talk a lot about what governance is, the role of the board of directors in cybersecurity, because we did a study in the last couple of years since I've been here, which is pretty interesting. And the issue of sustainability, which most people scratch their heads about and say, what in the world does that have to do with cybersecurity? And this issue of hardware, software, wetware, and mindware, which we'll end with. So I don't know how many of you have followed at all stories about Russian organized crime, Eastern European organized crime. It's not just phishing scams and spam and stuff. There's some serious stuff going on out there, and I actually endorse a heretical view, which I once heard expressed by a senior intelligence official, who said, you know, I consider the threat of organized crime and organized cybercrime greater than the threat of radical terrorists. And in a lot of ways, that's a very, very astute observation, because the motivations are different, and the nature of their organizations are different. And there's a lot going on in that area. The point about it is, when this is an example of most important thing I want to leave you with about thinking, really understanding where we are, and if you really understand where we are, really thinking ahead about where this is going. Because we knew that there was a guy back in San Mateo, California, in the late 1990s, and he broke into an online site. It wasn't a big site. It wasn't eBay or Amazon. It was a site selling something on the web. I can't say the nature of the business, but they were selling stuff on the web. He stole 80,000 credit card records from that site. There were firewalls in place. There was secure socket layer encryption in place. If you had a checklist, they would have done pretty well on that checklist. But he got 80,000 credit cards from them. At that time, it would probably have been worth, I think it was, what did I say, about over $10 million. If the credit card companies had to reissue all those cards, it would have cost about $10 million. He tried to sell his credit cards to an FBI agent. So he was a good hacker, but he wasn't a very good fence. And so he went to jail. The point is, at that time, I was talking about, and some other people were talking about, the issue isn't whether or not it's safe for you to send your credit card, your transaction over the web. Everybody's asking, is it safe to use my credit card on the web? Not the question. The question was, what happens to the aggregate of credit cards in the servers at the other end of that transaction? What happens as they build up? And in fact, after that case, once we got into 2000, 2001, 2003, 2004, there were so many stories every quarter of servers being turned over then finally the TJ Maxx case. How many millions of credit cards are we now talking about in the most recent cases that were turned over in one heist? So we knew all this stuff, and we knew back in the early 90s, we knew as the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union fell that there were going to be a lot of out-of-work KGB agents and others, and there was going to be a serious organized crime problem in Eastern Europe. And so we knew about both of these problems, and yet here they are. And so what could we have done? What could business and government have done? What should they have done? And what risks and threats are we now ignoring that something could be done about, so that we don't end up with threats like these 5-10 years down the line? that's an open question, and mostly today I've come here with questions. I'm going to skip past these slides because I want to get to some of the, well, let's see. No. I want to make sure we have enough time. Yeah. So every information security professional, every information security professional, when you talk to them, the Golden Fleece, the holy grail, if they're working in corporate world, is to get into the boardroom. If we can just get into the boardroom and give our presentation, we'll get our plan adopted, and then we'll have an executive mandate, and then honey and milk will flow, and there'll be peace in the land, and everything will be great. The other side of that story is that much of the time, I'm going to choose my words carefully, much of the time when an information security, like a chief security officer or chief information security officer gets into the boardroom and gets his, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of their valuable time, he finds out often, or he or she finds out often, that they really don't want to hear what you have to say. I mean, they're willing to endorse some plan, as long as it's reasonable and as long as you can give them return on investment, which is, of course, ridiculous, because when was the last time you had to offer a return on investment on the sprinkler system in a building? You don't have to. It's a threat that needs to be dealt with. And that's the problem with this kind of thinking that says, well, you have to cost justify this kind of security, basic, fundamental information security. But anyway, they don't want to hear about what's really wrong in their enterprise. Because if they are told what's really wrong in their enterprise, they might have to do something about it. And if they don't do something about it, they might have liability. Or if they do something and they don't do enough, they might have liability. So it's really kind of Alice in Wonderland sometimes when you get into the boardroom. And I'll give you a couple of examples of governance mentality that allowed us to get where we are. There was a security assessment done of a major company, and I asked my colleague how it was going, and he said, oh, well, they're finding this, this, and this, and this, and this, all of which we knew were there. And I said, well, that's great, so maybe something will get done. He said, actually, and the audit was being done, it was not an assessment, it was an audit. The audit was being done by one of the big, well, at that time it was the big six, now it's the big four, right? And it was being done by one of them, and I said, well, that's great, you're going to get some action. He said, well, actually, no. The issue has become, how do we change the audit to please the customer? Because if they don't change the audit, we're going to lose their business. So this is the corporate world without a mirror held up to it. And another story, there's another major corporation, once upon a time an information security officer in a major corporation was told that their $1.5 million global intrusion detection system would have to be delayed for a year because of cutbacks. Okay. Next, a week later, that security professional in a major corporation was doing executive security at the Gala Partners Conference for all the executive directors of this major corporation in one of the great cities of Europe. And he was at the party, the opening night, and he said to somebody, how much did this party cost? Not the whole conference, which went on for several days and brought people in from all over the world and had many parties. What did this one party cost? $1.5 million. So there's all kinds of priorities in the world. So we did a study of governance and what constitutes consensus, what constitutes best practices for governance and governance of security and privacy. And we asked these questions of board of directors